Hello, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. I'm J.D. McCartney, the Chief Communications Officer at Financial Planning Standards Board, and I'm here to welcome you to our global webinar event today. We have an exciting discussion planned on building your virtual practice, something that is especially relevant for so many of you right now. This event is part of our FPSB Financial Planet Live webinar series designed to educate and inspire financial planning professionals, including our global network of 190,000 certified financial planner professionals. The event is being broadcast live right now around the world on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And if you haven't already, I'd like to invite you to follow us, friend us, like us, connect with us right now on those platforms so you can stay tuned for information on future events. Now, on to the show. Hosting our discussion with virtual practice expert Adele Martin today is Dante DeGori. Dante is a proud CFP professional and the Chief Executive Officer of the Financial Planning Association of Australia. Dante has 20 years of experience in advancing the financial planning profession, supporting financial planners through change, advocating the importance of financial planning to the community, and working with education providers to foster the development of the next generation and building widespread consumer trust. Welcome to you, Dante, and thank you for being with us here today.
Great to be here, thank you.
And now, it's a pleasure for me to introduce Adele Martin. Adele is a CFP professional known as a disruptor in the financial advice industry. Adele has been in the industry since 2001. And as the founder of Firefly Wealth, has run a virtual practice for the last 5 years. She uses new technology like e-learning platforms, webinars, and Facebook groups to help her clients. Adele has won multiple national awards, including the Independent Financial Advisor Excellence Award, and is a regular contributor for publications like the Australian Financial Review. Thank you so much, Adele, for joining us today.
You're most welcome. Thanks for having me.
Great. And with that, Dante, I will go ahead and turn it over to you to lead our discussion.
Brilliant. Thank you, JD. Welcome, Adele, and welcome to the to what looks like hundreds, if not 1,000 odd people who have registered with us today for this event all around the world, which is really exciting. Both Adele and I are here in Australia, Sydney, Australia. It's very late for us. But no doubt wherever you are around the world, it's great to have you with us. I just want to, before we start, depending on whatever platform you are in, feel free to send us some comments, specifically questions for Adele, and we will try to get through as many of those as we can throughout the session. There is a lot of people on the call today, so we may not be able to get to all your questions, but we will try our best. So, Adele, let's get started. Look, firstly, just a little bit about yourself for the audience. As I said, there might be some Sydney-siders here, but majority of people may not have heard of you before. So a little bit about yourself and how you got into financial planning.
Yeah, so I won't bore everyone too much, but I actually got into it by accident. So I was at uni doing an accounting degree, and I realised that I didn't want to be an accountant, and it just wasn't for me. And I still finished the degree, and I thought, well, I better get a job somewhere else that's in an office, some sort of experience. And I got a job as an assistant for a financial advisor. And I could hear his conversations through the petition. And I realized that financial planning was much more people than money. So that's how I accidentally fell into financial planning. And since then, I have done pretty much every role. I started as an assistant. I then went to paraplanning. I then became an advisor. I then gone through 2 business partnerships. So I'm none for 2 with business partners. So I don't think I'll go for a 3rd. So I have run the gamut in all areas of financial planning.
Brilliant. And we'll get into in a moment about what you've been doing the last 5 years, which is running your virtual practice. But before then, look, obviously everyone has been impacted. Everyone on the call here is aware COVID-19 has impacted so many. How has it impacted you? And how have you fared during this time?
Yeah, because I was already virtual, it was really business as usual. In fact, I fielded more inquiries than ever during this COVID time, And I think that's something that, this has just brought money to the forefront. It's made money more of an issue. So I've seen, more inquiries about, people wanting to understand where their money goes, budgeting, insurance. It's just brought more people forward, as well as a massive increase in people wanting to know about shares. So this, most other crises seems to, put people a little bit off shares and a little bit more nervous. This seems to have had the opposite effect, where there's a lot of first-time investors that are, really keen to see this as an opportunity. So for me, it was business absolutely as normal. And in fact, we saw an increase in inquiries during the COVID time.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear that that you've actually had an increase. Also, are people actually seeking you out because of the way you run your business, or is there something else to it?
Yeah, a lot of my inquiries come through my Facebook group. So my leads come through that way. And yeah, I would say most of them would sign a couple of clients a week. They all are coming through the Facebook group. So I think that does, somewhat help, because they already see me online. They already know I'm an online person. And then they see me, virtually like this. So we run meetings like this. And yeah, so I think that probably has contributed to it. And maybe people are at home more and they're searching more, and they're on the internet more at home. They're working from home more. They've got more time in their hands. So that probably has something to do with it as well.
Okay, well, let's get into how you got into starting this virtual practice. So I think you mentioned, or JD mentioned in the introduction, you've been doing this for about 5 years. So give us a little bit of a history. How did this come about? How did you get started? And what have those 5 years been like? But sort of how did you get into it, and how did it come about?
Yeah, I wish I could say I was some sort of visionary and, did it by planning it, but I didn't. I did it by accident. And I was sharing an office with an accountant at the time, which was a great way for referrals, to share costs. And so we were sharing team members, and, it was just a, great fit. She decided to get out of accounting and sold her practice. And so then I had to find somewhere else to go. And so whilst I was finding somewhere else to go, I started working from home, and then just realized there was so many benefits from virtual that I didn't need a physical office. I didn't have to pay rent, and not just the rent saving. On top of that, I could now see clients all over Australia. I didn't just have to be in my area in Newcastle. I have clients right across the country. And then the next part of it was, well, I don't actually just have to have, where I am, I'm in a regional town. It's harder to get, talent and team members. So then I could expand my staff to not just, where I live, but all around the country as well. And so I've been able to employ largely other mums that also want flexibility and part-time work, and, that are super smart, super switched on, and they don't have to live in my area. So when I started to tick over all these benefits, I just thought, well, why would I go back to a physical office when, I can have all this, flexibility and benefits from working virtually?
Yeah. So let's talk about that a bit. So you mentioned you started off by accident. They would like to say you're a visionary and you saw this coming, the way of the future. But, I suppose, what have you learned during that time? And when you first started, I mean, I think you indicated that, the convenience of working from home was the concept of doing everything virtually with your clients. Was that straight away apparent, or did that take some time? And how did that progress?
I guess I thought for a while that I wouldn't only do it for new clients. I wouldn't do it to my existing. I assumed that my existing clients would still want to see me in person. And it wasn't until I started just, offering to do them virtually that I realized that actually they prefer virtual. And then I just made the decision that we're going virtual. There's no more in-office meetings. And I did that. And yeah, this is one of the mistakes that I made, is that I have a client that largely is now, I'm in their 20s, 30s and 40s, largely in their 30s and 40s, but I used to own a retiree practice. So some of my clients are older. I've got clients in their 70s. And I made a mistake thinking that they did not want to do virtual meetings. And so I didn't ever offer it to them. So I rented an office by the hour, that I could go to. So I kept doing that until one day they must have seen a newsletter or something that I put out, and they asked me about if they could do the virtual meeting. And I said, well, yeah. And then they said to me, well, because it's hard for them to get a park, they're older and it's hard for them. They worry about the traffic and parking. And it actually took the stress away from them to doing a meeting like this. So yeah, that's probably one of the mistakes that I assumed, is that I couldn't do it to my existing clients, particularly my older clients, because they would want to do it. And that was not the case at all. They actually embraced it. So for me, that was probably something that I could have done a lot earlier.
So you effectively transitioned. So you were doing a hybrid model almost, where your new clients you're offering sort of this virtual service, but you were thinking that you didn't want to rattle, if you like, or change the dynamics with your existing clients, you kept offering the face. So you were in fact, so you had a serviced office that you were using for some time as well.
I did. And then I just thought, I'm just going all in. And when I went all in, and this is something for anyone else listening, this is something I would say, is to think about how you're going to position it to your current clients. How are you going to get them? I mean, now it's great you can blame COVID, but if COVID wasn't here, how can you transition to this online, model and tell them about the online? Is to think about the benefits to the client. Don't think about the benefits to you. Yes, there's lots of benefits to us. But when I did this, when I sent out an email to all the clients, when I did that, I thought about the benefits to the client and I made sure I articulated those. Like the fact that they could record the meetings and they could watch them back if they wanted to. So that made it, all of a sudden, super valuable. The fact that they could, if they had a partner, they could be in different places. So sometimes people are at work and sometimes people are at home with the kids. They don't have to figure out a time that they can both be in the same place. On top of that, so for me, it also meant, and I say this to clients, I can employ the best talent, the best team in the country. I have choice of the entire all of Australia, not just my area. So that means we have the best people being able to service you. So if you start to stack these benefits to the clients, that makes it an easy transition. The other thing I'll say is if you are transitioning clients is to not make it forever. Just say, listen, I'm going to trial this. If it doesn't work, we'll go back to the other way. People don't like being locked into anything. And so that was another thing. If you are positioning it, I would recommend that. Yeah,
that's great. So let's talk about it. So I want to talk about the way you have managed with your clients. So and I really want to give some tips out there for those listening who are on the call today, who not only are forced into this scenario potentially, but may want to long term, as you said, because of COVID, continue operating this full time. But so I want to talk about your clients, but also want to talk about your staff. So you mentioned already a couple of times about the fact that you have been able to attract some like mums, for example, who find this of benefit to them in terms of having the virtual or the remote working arrangement. So talk to me a little bit how you manage the staff, the type of also, is there any specific training or mentality that a staff member must have? So apart from the fact that it's convenient, it can work for my lifestyle, to your point, how does it position the client in first and foremost in terms of having remote staff? So is there anything you've done specially? Have you had any bad staff that hasn't worked out? And is there anything special about a staff member in picking for your office?
Yeah, I think the most important stuff is to make sure you're still checking with your team like this, that they can still see you, and doing those sort of, I call them huddles, but team meetings twice a day, at the start of the day and then a midway check-in. And we do what are your top 3 things for today? What were your top 3 things from yesterday? Are they done, not done, or in progress? And then what are your top 3 things for today? And then we say, is there anything you're stuck with, need a hand with, unsure about? This is your opportunity. So we do that regularly. Those check-ins and being able to see each other like this is super important. It has to be visual. On top of that, I would say, and this is something that is one of the drawbacks of going virtual. It's not all positive. One of the drawbacks is you do lose some of that connectivity with the team. So it's really important to have, other fun things that you're doing, like Friday afternoon drinks. You could do virtual drinks like this. There's virtual games that you can play online as well. Meditation sessions you can do. So trying to bring some of that cultural stuff that you would have in the office, trying to bring it virtually as well. Because for the right person, I think of some people that I employ, the fact that they don't have to track their hours. I don't have anyone tracking the hours. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm outcomes based. So if they can have full flexibility, if their kids are sick or they're in lockdown, they can still work around that. Obviously, depending on the age of the kids. If they're too little, then I have a small child at home today, so I know that you can't work from home with an 18-month-old. But you've got older kids, they can, be at home and you can be flexible. If you need to go to stuff in the middle of the day, school stuff, you can. So I have that full flexibility. But we do have those regular check-ins with people to make sure that everyone's on task. And we use a task management system called Monday. I really quite like Mondays as a system. It's good on your phone and easy to update and track tasks and stuff. So we use that as well. But yeah, there is definitely some things you can do around that team building that, I think, having a catch up maybe once a year where you all get together, some sort of, little summit or conference where your whole team gets together. I think if time and your budget allows, I think that would be a good idea to actually connect in person. And so, yeah, that can really add to that culture as well, because, your team without your team, you don't have a business. So it's important. But I think offering that flexibility to people, that part-time work, that has been meant I've been able to attract some amazing talent.
Yeah, and that's great. And so just a couple questions from that. So one, in terms of the flexibility, which obviously is great, as I said, for you and the staff, is there any expectation when you've gone virtual from clients that your staff and you are available 24/7?
No,
how do you manage that, if it does happen?
I think that's a part of advisors' job, is to make sure they have boundaries. So as an example, I only have one appointment night a week that's late. That's it. So previously I used to be doing it, 3 or 4 nights a week, and it just got too much. So now I have one. And you know what happened? All of a sudden the clients can do 12 o'clock meetings now. So I think having boundaries is really important, and sticking to them and explaining why. That, you value your team's, family time and their downtime. And so they'll only be responding to emails and communication between these times. And if you set boundaries like that and explain why, people understand.
I'll let you have a drink. I think maybe you're having a dry throat though. So look, that's great. And so again, setting boundaries with clients is really important, especially for your team and yourself to be able to manage it. Because just because you're virtual, one of the things, of course, that COVID has created, that people who aren't used to working remotely and working virtually, you can get into a trap of basically, not switching off. And so is there, so one of the questions here, of course, for anyone thinking about this, is that you're still running a business, and so setting expectations with your clients in terms of availability, et cetera, is really important. What about on the from the staff side? So two things for me, two questions here. One is, a lot of, sometimes you might have some complicated technical matters in respect to client scenarios, and it's often quite beneficial to be able to discuss that with a colleague. How do you manage that? So when people have challenging client scenarios, and then secondly, how do you manage professional development for your staff as well?
Yeah, so I think discussions is really important. So I'm a member of a lot of other online groups. So one of them in Australia is XY, and I will often go in there and chat with my other advisor buddies. So that for me has several thousand advisors on that platform. So for me, that's super important, is to have other advisors that you can bounce stuff off. And so and for me, they happen to be all virtually, so that works really well for me. And yeah, for me, those sort of networks. And then with my managing my CBD points, especially now with COVID, it's all virtual anyway. So, but it's not that I don't ever leave the house or ever go anywhere. I still like to go to, and I do miss some of the, the FPA events. There's, obviously Congress is online now. So, I definitely do mix that, in-person connection. I think it's important, when COVID, disappears, that we do have some of that come back. But I don't think it'll go back to what it was before. I think people will like a balance between the two. I don't think it can be all one way. But I think there'll be more flexibility in people seeing some benefits from being at home, that they get more time with their family. They don't have to spend hours commuting. They can, healthier, they're cooking more, they're exercising more. There's so many benefits from people working from home. I don't think we'll ever go back to solely being at home again. Yeah,
I think you're right about that. So let's talk a little bit about your clients. So firstly, assumption again that you're virtual. Do you, has it translated that you literally do have clients all around the country in terms of Australia, and do you obtain interest internationally?
Yeah, so yes to both questions. So obviously with international people, like, I'll at least once or twice a month, I'll get someone from overseas. I had a couple this week actually from the UK. I have a network of other advisors that I refer them on to. So yes, I do get them internationally as well. And then, so I've got clients, I think, in most states in Australia. So it gets a little bit tricky in time zone because of daylight savings here. So we make everything in my time, in New South Wales time. And when clients book the calendar, it goes into their time, they see it in their time zone. So I use a system called Calendly. And when they book it, they see their time zone and it goes into their calendar in their time zone. So it doesn't get confusing and they get reminders in their time zone automatically. So yeah, that can just get a little bit tricky, but software like Calendly takes that trickiness out of it. And yeah, with team meetings and stuff, it can get a little bit trickier as well with time zones. So because they're, Queensland, two of my team are in Queensland and one's in Melbourne. So it can get a little bit trickier with that, but not unmanageable, just with daylight savings.
And I want to, I've just been writing down as you've been mentioning, because I think it'd be great for the audience to get a list of the types of technology or software that you use. So far you've mentioned two, and we're going to go through as you discussed locally, but you've mentioned Monday. I think it's monday.com. Is that the one used in terms of your task list? Yeah, and then the other one you've just, sorry, Adele, say that again.
Yeah, Monday, that's the one I like and use. It's really easy to use.
Yep. And the other one you just mentioned there, which helps book the appointments with the clients, was Calendly. Is that right? Could you?
Calendly, yep. I can put through a list and get the guys to circulate it around. But yeah, Calendly, Calandly. That's another one. And then the reason why, Calendly is really good. And of course I use, which I think a lot of people are using, is Zoom. That's another technology that I use. Zoom is the platform. I use Zoom Meeting and Zoom Webinar. The two are very different. If you're just running client meetings, you just need Zoom Meeting. And but I like the paid version. There's a free version and the paid version as well. The reason why I think the paid version is like $20 a month. The reason why I like the paid version, when you do an event, like it can link, so I can get Calendly to talk to Zoom, and it can create a Zoom meeting link and save it in the calendar invite. So you don't want, that's a tip, you don't want to be using the same meeting link for every single meeting for clients. That is a security issue. You want to be creating a new link each time. And if you're sending out a calendar invite to clients and then booking it, and then you're going to manually create the Zoom meeting link and send it to them, it's clunky. So the Zoom Meeting Pro, the one that's $20 a month, talk to Calendly. And when they automatically book the Calendly appointment, the Zoom meeting automatically gets created and sent to the client. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why I like Zoom. Other technology that I use as well to communicate with the team, what you'll find is in the office, you often are talking and having conversations. And you'll have a lot of little things that go back and forth. What happens when you move virtually is you'll get more emails. And I don't know about anybody else. I don't want any more emails than I already have. And so you'll need another way to be able to communicate to your team quickly. So like WhatsApp are great, Slack, Teams, as well. So Microsoft Teams. So there's a few different ones out there. What I'll say is just talk to your compliance and to see what they'll sign off on. So I think one of the more secure ones that they like is Microsoft Teams. So yeah, talk to your compliance, but you'll need another way to quickly communicate to your teams. Personally, I like Slack. I think that's, a great way to communicate. So I like Slack. The other pieces of technology that people think that they need is fancy web cameras and stuff like that, and fancy microphones. Yes, you can, but don't use that as a reason not to do it. So I actually have a Logitech webcam that I can put up. I usually don't use it because it picks up every single bit of freckle and everything, and it's way too high definition. But if it does give a much better quality camera, so a Logitech HD, web camera can be a great addition, but you don't need it. Most of the ones that come with built-in are fine. And same with microphone quality. Most of the laptops now have great inbuilt microphones. You don't need anything. But if you wanted to, you could do a Rode microphone if you wanted to. But honestly, what you've got is enough to get started with. And then I'm not sure. Do you want me to keep going with some of this tech stuff?
Well, no, I'll start. I think I'll come in and ask some more about that. I think just in terms of the technology and the client. So let's a couple of questions have popped up here as well. And so let's go to those. So one of the questions here is from Pratik Vora from YouTube, and about recording of meetings. So let's talk about that. So you're having a meeting. You're using, as you've said, Zoom meeting. Are you recording them? And why are you recording? What are you doing with them? So are you recording for a compliance reason or for file noting? What is it, the purpose of recording? And how do you manage that from a privacy perspective?
Yeah, great question. Firstly, you have to check with your compliance to see if they'll allow you to record it. So ours do. The second thing is always ask permission from the client and get, is it okay if I record it? So that's something we always do as well. And then the reason why I use it isn't actually for file notes. I do know some other advisors that like it for file notes. So I position it as valuable to the client that they can watch it back, so that they don't have to stress and take meeting notes or retain everything. If their partner can't be in the meeting, this is really great for them to be able to recap on. So that's how I position it as being valuable. I do know some advisors that get it transcribed and that becomes their file note. So for us, though, it just became too long and not really great from for our power plan to be able to read and get information. Reading a 20-page thing was just too much. So we have a fairly templatized process for our meetings, and therefore I often will just write or type the meeting notes as they go. Because I ask the standard questions, client respond to this, I get the client quotes, they're the bits I have to type, and then the action items for the team off the back of it. So I find that gets lost in a big long file note, and so I prefer to have a abbreviated version as well. So I haven't used it for compliance purposes, although you could, or for file note purposes you could, but I just position it as being super valuable to the clients.
And do you have there's a question here from Rami Becker from Facebook. Thank you for your question. The question here is about how do you assure the clients about security? So have you had any concerns from clients about security? How do you address that? Or do you deal with that straight away in terms of how assuring them about the security of the information and, of course, of the meeting?
Yeah, so I guess you can obviously Zoom, it can be password protected. So that's definitely something you could look to doing, is password protecting things. So I haven't had any pushback about it. Sometimes it's probably more a question in our head than theirs, but there's definitely been some increase, awareness about cybersecurity now more people are online. So as an example, when we send information via email, we PDF it and password secure it. Then we send a password via text message. So there is definitely X security you can do, and you can take if they're concerned about that, you can definitely make sure you've got your process ready, your script ready to be able to handle that. So that you've got two-factor authentication for things. All the information for us is stored in a software program called Xplan. It requires two-factor authentication. You have to have my phone and email to be, and know my password to be able to get into it. So I think reassuring them, passwords on things. Using password software like LastPass to store passwords. So there's extra, security that you can put in place. But I've never had clients concerned about that really, recording stuff as well. They've never had an issue with that. It's the same amount of information that's online now, except that, we're doing more meetings virtually. So Zoom has stepped up their security though massively and put some extra things in place.
And then let's talk about the preparation side of things. So one of the things that you and I spoke about before was, how the difference, I suppose, in terms of the traditional approach where a client comes in and it's a face-to-face meeting. In this virtual world, what preparation do you do with the client before the actual meeting? So from not only about the meeting itself, but the technology they're going to use and how to use the technology and the work you do in prepping all that.
Yeah. So
how important is it?
Yeah. So especially if you're got clients that might be older or a little bit technology adverse. One of the things that I did with my older clients was I got one of my PAs to run through how the technology worked before the meeting so that they were nice and at ease and they weren't stressed at all. So that way they could test the sound. And most of them use the iPads. I think pretty much all of the older clients used iPads. So because it was pretty simple for them to be able to use. So she took them through that process and made sure they were comfortable and working. That can take a lot of anxiety away. But I use that pre-process as a bit of a way to overcome objections, but also to start to get them really ready and excited for the meeting. So as soon as they book that first meeting, there's a series of confirmations that go out. Those confirmations don't just say, oh, this is your meeting date. Those confirmations are sharing things like client success stories, what we're going to cover in the meeting. We are sending a series. So one, when they book the meeting, and then, I think it's a week out and then a day out and then the day of, we've got these regular, emails that go out. One of the other things I often do is, we'll send a video out, particularly after the meeting, or sometimes I've done it before the meetings as well, where I'm like, can't wait to see you. I'm so excited. We've got so much to cover. When you can do stuff like that and they can see you, it starts to build that rapport early as well. So use of videos, I think, can really be helpful, particularly if you can personalize that video and use their name. Use that pre-process to help take their anxiety away. Often people are quite stressed before those first meetings because, they're talking about money. We do it all day, every day, so sometimes we forget. But talking about money can be quite an emotional and anxious topic for a lot of people. So I've had clients tell me they'd rather go naked than talk about money. So I'm like, well, okay. So it's quite a personal thing to talk about. And so I think we sometimes forget that. So taking their anxiety away and explaining the steps and exactly what you're going to do, how long is the meeting going to go for, what the technology is going to look like, can really, make that meeting go a lot smoother. But also you can start to have that frequently asked questions list you could attach to the pre-meeting as well. And that frequently asked questions could be, what about security? It could cover that. It could cover things like, how do you get paid? How are you licensed? All those frequently asked questions, you can actually attach that in an email document and you could cover that before the meeting. So the meeting doesn't have to be all that admin-y stuff, going through your financial services guide or whatever. You can cover a lot of that frequently asked questions off before the meeting. So it can cut meeting times down and make it more efficient, but also give it a much better client experience as well.
Yeah. And look, that's an important point, I think, there. The takeaway there is really the preparation to try and get clients comfortable with the technology and what's going to happen in the meeting is equally important virtually as is in a real world scenario, in a real physical sense scenario. There's a couple other questions here around is there an issue in terms of confidentiality? So Shannon Clark just asked a question here. It just goes back to sort of the security confidentiality question. Just with your staff located everywhere, I mean, I'm assuming you must manage all the data in a cloud-based system or something. Yeah. Okay.
Cloud-based system. Nothing is. Everyone has to log in remotely. Nothing is stored on desktops or anything like that. So in some ways, it's more secure than at work where people have maybe files on desks and stuff like that. So we use that, and also I have obviously ultimate admin access. So if we were to remove any stuff, I can remove Dropbox very quickly. So I do obviously that beforehand. So it's important that you have the admin access and you have that ultimate control, but it is all done remotely, all logged in, nothing stored on desktops. It actually means if you got a new computer, if something happens, you can log on the next day somewhere else and start work. So that's how you do it. Confidentiality is use the cloud.
Brilliant. Okay, excellent. And look, there's been a pile of questions that are coming through regarding social media tips and things like that. So I know Adele is an expert on this. So we will get into that in a moment. But I just want to finish off with the clients. The client. So we've talked through about the technology of the clients, the engagement with the clients. You've made the point about also that don't dismiss the age group and demographic of the client. If you don't assume that they won't actually interact with technology. I think it's really important, especially in the environment today where I think everyone's been forced to accept that and take that on. Can you talk a little bit about your fee structure in terms of, is there an so one of the things that I jumped to, I think when you and I last spoke, was because you are operating virtually, is there an expectation from your clients that your service, your fees will be cheaper than someone running an office that they go see physically because you have reduced costs? Is there an expectation? And also, are you a fee for service? So there's been a couple of questions about the type of your model. Is it a fee for service model or not?
Yes, we are fee for service. I haven't taken commission since I started the business. So on any insurance or anything like that. And the question around the fees was, do they think it's cheaper? I've never had anyone ask that. And I think advisors get hung up on fees. This is going to be a bit of a tangent, but I think advisors have become so adverse to sales and fees and talking about anything to do with that. There's no sales training in the stuff that we do in Australia now, that selling or becomes this dirty thing talking about fees. It actually isn't. Selling and sales is an amazing thing because it just means you're serving people. Sales is service, and if you can serve people, it means you can help more people. So yeah, fees. I think advisors get stuck up on fees because they don't themselves believe they deliver the value. When you start to articulate the value that you give, and this is one thing that we are very good at, is recording and articulating the value that we give to clients, then my fees are very cheap. And so fees are only an issue if you can't demonstrate the value. So the value that I demonstrate is not in investment returns. It's in things like understanding where their money goes. It's being here during this COVID time. So I had several meetings during this COVID time where my clients lost income. They had a 20% or more reduction in their income, and none of them talked about reducing the advice fees. So they now needed this service more than ever. Because during those meetings that I had with them, those COVID meetings, I was able to tell them exactly the impact of that 20% pay reduction, what it meant to them, what they needed to do. Because I track all their income and expenses. I treat a household like a business. I knew exactly what they needed to do. I track their net worth. I track their savings. I can tell them exactly the value that we've been able to do. So, I just had a conversation before to a client. One change, is going to, she's got a credit card debt. She didn't realize how much interest she was paying. It's going to be, a $3,000 saving by what we are able to do. So, the fees are only an issue if you can't articulate your value. And I've never had anyone question the fees.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So, and look, again, I think to your point, that question is a bigger question. It's not just around running a virtual practice, not explaining and demonstrating your value. Look, an interesting. Just to go about the actual what happens in the meeting, client meeting. A great question here from Erica Moodley from Facebook. And I know when we spoke before, I mean, definitely a lot of financial planners like to demonstrate via pictures and drawings in terms of in meetings, in face-to-face meetings with a whiteboard, etc. in particular, to try and demonstrate an advice concept or a strategy. In your case, with the virtual, how do you do that, and how do you, I think the question here from Erica is, how do you land that important concept? So, any tips or tricks you can mention?
Great question. So, and it definitely was something that was lacking when I went online. So what I did was I got a iPad and one of the newer iPads and an Apple Pencil. So you can do this with Samsung as well. They've got a similar version. And what I do is I use Zoom, and with the Zoom meeting link, I've got it on my iPad and also on my computer. So on my computer, I'm like this, and then I connect my iPad to the computer just using the cord, and then I can write on the screen. So I wish I could do it, but I have a presentation like that, say, that I talk to the clients about, and then I just can write on the screen and it lets me draw. So I use a program called, so I use iPad with a special pencil, and then I use a program called Notability. So Notability is a program that lets you draw circles, change colors, you can import a PowerPoint presentation, you can write, all my notes are done on that. And so, that I find super helpful to explain, because I mean, that's our role as a financial advisor, is to make complex things simple so other people can understand. And you can't always do that verbally. And in fact, most people probably don't pick up things verbally. And so visual with verbal, clients are more likely to understand it. And if they're more likely to understand it, they're more likely to take your advice. If they're confused and they're not sure about it, if you're not using pictures, chances are a confused mind does nothing. So they're not going to take action. So definitely need pictures and being able to draw and things like that. It really enhances your meeting. And then also, just looking at yourself the whole time probably gets a bit boring. So it makes the meeting, more exciting. It keeps the client's attention. It keeps them engaged. So the app was called Notability is the app that I use. And someone was just asking that. And that along with iPad works really well.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think someone's also mentioned, Zoom, maybe the meeting software might allow you to also do fancy things as well. So I think it's important to explore that. But as Adele said, she uses Notability and uses the iPad, and that works well for her. So let's talk a little bit about client acquisition and the use of social media. So Adele, again, this is something, for those that don't know, I mean, Adele does this quite well, and in fact has helped many of her fellow financial planners in Australia about this. And so we do have a question here, and there's a couple others from Deborah about social media, the do's and don'ts. And perhaps if you could just explain the type of stuff you do, like on Facebook, and the work you do with potential prospective clients.
So as I said, most of my clients come from my Facebook group. How do I fill that Facebook group? Well, I do PR stuff. I have a regular gig on a radio show that I do that gets leads in. I comment in other people's Facebook groups. Just tonight I did that. Someone had a financial question in another Facebook group. It's actually a mum's group. I just happened to answer and say I'm a financial advisor and this is the question. I had 6 people within a half an hour join my group from that post. So, things like that. I do a lot of organic strategies rather than paid stuff. So yeah, for me, that works really well. Instagram, in particular, Instagram stories is where I get a lot of traction as well, and chats and DMs. So a lot of my sales are actually now done via chat. So sell by chat. So chatting online rather on Facebook Messenger and Instagram Messenger. So yeah, the large majority, I've got a podcast. That podcast feeds to the Facebook group. So anything that I do, any sort of PR stuff, newspaper stuff, whatever I do, I post on my Instagram, I'm drawing people to that Facebook group. In that Facebook group, on the way in, I ask them 3 questions. One of the questions is, do you want to work together on a plan for your money? More than half the time they say yes. And so I start a conversation with them straight away. So just tonight, of those 6 people that opted in tonight to the Facebook group, I think 3 or 4 of them have said yes, they want to have a conversation about money. So and then inside the Facebook group, we've got regular things that we do inside there. We've got like it's a webinar, but I don't call it a webinar, coming up, a money masterclass coming up. So we do that inside the Facebook community. We've got regular themed days that we do inside that Facebook community. So yeah, for me, all of it channels to that Facebook group, and that Facebook group is where I build up that know, like, and trust factor with clients. So with financial planning, especially I suppose being virtual, people are like, well, who are you? What do you do? They might need to see you a few more times before they build up that know, like, and trust factor. And so if you're on Instagram, you're on Facebook and Facebook groups, it's a way to build that trust with them.
Is there a lot of, you mentioned Instagram, Facebook, and even podcasting. I mean, how much time and effort does that take you? How do you factor that in terms of that sort of, cost benefit analysis? And I'm assuming with those channels, correct me if I'm wrong, but, it's being active regularly. That's important. I mean, I'm assuming you must post frequently. How frequently would you do that?
Yeah. So here's a big tip is that I do content once and I use it multiple times. So as an example, if I did a Facebook group webinar as an example, or a Facebook Live inside the group, I can strip that audio and that becomes my podcast. That can then become a blog post or a post that we put on Instagram. That can become a meme. So they can take a quote out from it and use it. So I've now trained my PA to do all that. So I have to do the first bit, which is the audio, and do it, and that's it once, and that then gets used for multiple things. I don't have to keep coming up with new stuff all the time. One thing gets used multiple way on multiple platforms.
Excellent. Yeah. So there is a technique there, and obviously having some staff help to do that is really important. In terms of there's a question here. I suppose this is, going back to the fee question, Paul Baker from Facebook. Just a question in there in respect to whether you have a retainer model or do you charge on a per transaction model, just in terms of the fee structure?
Both. So I have a once-off fee. I have an online course that people take themselves. So it's more education and general advice. But it is a way for people to get access to advice that may not be able to afford to see me one-on-one. That is a once-off fee. And then we have the ongoing monthly retainer fee. So where they commit to 12 months. That is my preference, because we know that, it's like going to the gym. You can't go to the gym once and expect to get fit. It's a bit like going to a financial advisor. You can't go to a financial advisor once and expect to have all your money problems solved. So we know the clients that we work best with and have the best results are the ones that work with us long term. And that's that retainer model.
And two more questions regarding clients and staff and fee. So one was there's a question here from Dilshad Bilmoria. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Just in terms of how many clients do you have? So what's your sort of how many staff do you have to clients? Is there a number of clients that that you optimize that you'd say you won't go beyond because of your structure?
So I have a 50-ish one-on-one clients, and I also have about 60, nearly 70 that are in this education program. So they've been a good feeder into the other one. So I am pretty happy at 50. I'm now looking at strategies that I can scale. So I am making over my business as we speak, and we are going to a bit of a hybrid model of one-on-one and group. So I'm incorporating with my clients more group training rather than seeing me one-on-one. We're currently doing it at the moment because with all the other stuff that I do, I'm at capacity. This new model, which uses scale really well. So I would do like a regular monthly webinar rather than having to see everyone. So that to me is a way to give better value than seeing heaps of clients one-on-one. And that's what I've been doing for the last 6 months. And I'm really pleased to say the clients have loved it. In fact, they came back to me recently saying, I haven't rolled it out yet. I did a little test group early in the year just to see what it'd be like. And they're like, when can we do more of that, group stuff? I want to see how everyone else is doing. And so, yeah, that group, so just like group fitness, you would do stuff as a group model is what I'm pushing towards to help with that scale.
Excellent. And just in terms of your clientele, we talked about before that potentially the age demographic, that you potentially I think you're targeting sort of a more younger, but you do have retiree clients in there. Is there a particular type of client? Like, do you high net worth individuals interested in virtual financial planning, or is it more about is there a particular demographic that you target? Could you comment on that at all?
Well, I think I target my particular demographic, which is people largely in their 30s and 40s. A lot of them are self-employed. I just attract self-employed people, I think, because I'm self-employed. My husband's self-employed. He's got a business as well. So a lot of them are self-employed. But I think the key is to make sure your messaging, whether that's on Facebook or wherever you're going to do your messaging, reflects the sort of clients that you're going to work with. So I would, and I have got clients that have millions of dollars. One was $3 million to invest. They're not actually my ideal client. I find them someone else to work with. So I know other advisors would love those sort of clients, but I just know that they're not going to gel with me. And so, yeah, I personally don't give my value by investing. So I'd be really clear about sort of clients that you can help.
And does that help? So a question here from Lavinia Martins on YouTube. Just a question about sort of that filter, because obviously you mentioned you do get quite a number of clients that come through your social media. How do you filter those? So how do you work out between which clients are the real deal versus those that are wasting your time?
Yeah, I have a scripted process that I use, and I ask them questions on Sell by Chat. So that way I don't go on the phone to them unless I know they're very qualified. In fact, I'm trying to do the sales process now. I don't have to get on the phone at all. And so I want to push all to chat. So those questions. Now, that process, because it's quite scripted, I can get somebody else to do it. So I'm a big fan of me doing the process first, fully understanding it, all the ins and outs of it, before I try and give the process to somebody else to do. I do that with my social. I've done that with everything. And so, yeah, with this at the moment, it's definitely still on my desk. But eventually I can see how it could be someone else could train in that Sell by Chat process. And that's where we're asking those filtering criteria. So I'm asking a series of questions to make sure they're the right fit before, get a phone call with them or before they, talk about the program.
Excellent. And just a little bit more on social media, I suppose that one of the questions in terms of, is there any sort of tips about don'ts, what the not to do? Are there any regulation issues? I mean, I appreciate that this is probably very dependent on different locations, but is there anything there that you are mindful of from that perspective, or are there just any sort of don'ts, if you like, in using social media?
I guess don't be super boring, because you have to show your personality. people are going to want to, people want to see you. They want to understand who you are and who your team is. And so don't be super boring. And yeah, sometimes I see some of the posts that go up. I'm like, no one's going to resonate with that. So yeah, make sure your content's super. It's like one of the content ideas that I have is, what questions do you get asked all the time? What are your frequently asked questions that clients ask you all the time? Just do little videos about that. It takes like, a minute. Just do those little videos. So, as a question I get asked all the time is, how do I pick my retirement fund? How do I know if I'm in a good fund? So I did a video on that. I did a video, how do I share money with my partner when I go on maternity leave? What do I do? Did a video about that. And then, they have a little call to action at the end. If you want to know more about this and this is helpful, you want to know more about this, please just shoot me through a message. And so, yeah, it doesn't have to be rocket science. But yeah, I think that's probably a mistake is, don't be super boring. Make it interesting, stuff that people actually want to read. And so those frequently asked questions are a good one. And yeah, so that. But in terms of disclaimers, I think you need to check with a lot of licensees would like you to go. Well, a lot of dealer groups, I'm not sure what they call them overseas. You might need to sign off on your social stuff before you post it. So that's a little bit of a challenge. But also sometimes, especially if I'm talking about something I always put disclaimers on, the general advice warning, not take action. So I've always got that on, unless it's something that's, very not money related at all, which occasionally it is. Like I do a lot of, money mindset stuff. So when some of my more popular posts around, how did your parents talk to you about money in your childhood? That doesn't need a general advice warning. And so, how was money spoken about in so I use a little bit of discretion with it. But yeah, definitely check with your licensee about their rules. I also know that sometimes overseas, I think it was the United States, they have to keep a record of all their social stuff as well. So yeah, there's definitely different rules in different countries. And so make sure you're across what your requirements are.
Yeah, very good point. We should stress that out, that definitely check in with your local your local regulators, your local your employer, the institution or the employer you work for in terms of their rules around that, and definitely check with your local regulator if you're not sure. But every territory is a bit different. Adele, there's obviously a lot of interest in terms of continuing to run their business virtually, or to potentially go virtually post-COVID. If there was 1, 2, or 3 tips that you could give to everyone on the call today about, if they are serious about this, and so this is, not dabbling in this, but serious about really transforming their business to operate virtually, what are perhaps the top 3 things that they should really think about or do before they leap?
I think the biggest thing is just be careful of who you take advice from. If I would have listened to all the other advisors around me that were older, I would never have went virtual. Because they told me people won't trust you if you go virtual. I had multiple advisors tell me that many, many times, and that is simply not true. So just be careful of who you're listening to and who you're taking advice from. So I'm a big fan of not taking advice from people that don't have the results that I want. So just be very mindful of that. And I think that's the biggest issue. That's the other biggest issue is the advisor has to believe it themselves. They have to believe that it's better for the client. And if they don't believe it, how are they ever going to sell it? How are they ever going to position to being on virtual? So if you believe it yourself, you will, position it'll be easy transition to the client. So the analogy that I use, imagine there was a doctor that had the cure to some sort of illness that you had. They lived in the United States. I'm going to Australia, the United States. The only way I can see that doctor is online like this. I know that they're the best in the world and that they're going to have the best chance of getting me a cure. Would I see that doctor online? Or would I go to my local GP because he lived 5 minutes down the road? So when you believe it like that to your core, that you are the best at what you do, and that's why you operate, virtually, so you can have the best team, so you can serve clients all over the country. When you believe that to your core, all the benefits, it's very easy to translate that to the clients. So, and the other thing is, I would say, don't get hung up on the technology. Don't think you have to have all this fancy technology. It's actually not hard. And be very careful of the story around technology that you tell yourself. So years ago, I didn't have, the greatest working environment where I was told that I wasn't very good with technology. And so, let me do it. You can't do it. Let me do it. When you have someone constantly telling you stuff that you're not good at something, you start to believe it. And so I started to think, well, I'm not good with technology. I can't do this. It's too hard. And so then, you know, all of a sudden I worked really strongly on my mindset and the stories that I was telling myself. And every time I tried to do something that I thought was hard, thought two things. Firstly, I thought, this is simple, this is easy, this is fun. That story, this is hard, technology is confusing, I replaced with, this is simple, this is easy, this is fun. I put that up on my screen, I had that in my wallet, I had that everywhere. And that was one hurdle. And then the second one, so I would just, I can't remember the second, but that's the main thing. It's your mindset, what you think about technology, that's going to contribute massively. So be careful of that little voice that you're telling yourself, because technology is actually really easy. Oh, that's the other thing. If something's difficult, I think, actually, this is amazing. If it's hard, because I'm about to learn something. Something hard and that's difficult now, I'm about to learn something. This is amazing. So two things. This is simple, this is easy, this is fun, this is amazing, I'm about to learn something. As opposed to how I used to be, which is, this is too hard, I can't understand it. So I've gone from that, 10, 15 years ago to I'm not good with technology to now I regularly talk around the world on technology issues. So that mindset, what you tell yourself, be very careful of that story, because you'll start to believe it.
That is brilliant, and I don't think we could end any better on that, Adele. Thank you very much. That has been a fascinating discussion. There's been some great questions and comments, and I apologise that we can't get to all of them. But Adele has graciously agreed that she would share with a list of her technology that she uses, software. So there's been a few questions regarding CRM and other things like that. So we'll try and get that list off Adele. And through FPSB Limited, we'll get that shared around the network. But Adele, thank you very much for your participation today. And I'll be looking to hand over to JD to close the session out.
Wow, thank you so much to both of you. It's getting quite late in Australia now, so we appreciate you staying up with us. But what a great conversation. I feel like we could probably even use another hour just for Q&A. So hopefully you'll be willing to come back and visit us again. So thank you both again for being with us today.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
And thank you to all the viewers around the world. And just before you go, I want to invite you to learn more about our next event, which is World Financial Planning Day on Tuesday, October 7th. That's just 2 weeks from today. We would love to see you on October 7th at our live global virtual panel event. And we have experts at that event from around the world ready to help us explore adapting to a new normal and the future of financial planning. So check out worldfpday.org for information on the live panel event and lots of other events happening around the globe. That's worldfpday.org. And right now, stay tuned for a very quick preview of this year's World Financial Planning Day. And thanks again to all of you for tuning in.